All right, everyone, on to chapter 10. This one's called Kiana Rubini. Bad news from Utah. The equipment trailer got struck by lightning, so production on my mom's movie has to be shut down for a couple weeks. Can I come back home while you guys are waiting to start up again? I asked Mom over Skype. That wouldn't work, she tells me. What about school? How can we just pull you out of Greenwich when you just got started and then re-enroll you once shooting resumes here? That would be too disruptive. I have to hold myself back from screaming. There's nothing to disrupt. I don't really go here. Geez Louise never registered me. I'm not even in a real class. Forget it. Mom would be on the phone to Dad in seconds flat. Never a pleasant combo. I'd be back in that office fast enough to make my head spin, registering for 8 classes instead of just 1. 8 new teachers to get used to, who give real assignments and real homework. No, my life here isn't perfect, but it's designed for maximum bearableness. Why get complicated? I'm a short timer, just not quite as short as I thought. 2 extra weeks in Greenwich, of Dad and Stepmonster, of Chauncey's sniffles and fevers and rashes and barfs. 2 more weeks in the Parmesan house. 2 more weeks of the Unteachables. Fine, I can handle it. I can do 2 more weeks standing on my head. Speaking of school, Mom goes on, how are you fitting in? I went there, back when it was the old Greenwich High. Great, I tell her. I've already gotten picked for this special program. Mom beams. Special? I knew she wouldn't be able to resist the idea of me being exceptional. I plow forward. It's called SCS 8. Really hard to get into. I should know. I'm not even really in it. The teacher's fantastic. He's super hands-off because he wants us to learn to work independently. Mr. Kermit believes... Kermit? She interrupts. You mean from the cheating scandal? Cheating scandal? Mom's brow furrows. It was an awfully long time ago, the early 90s. I remember I was away at college when it happened. But it must be the same person. Kermit isn't a very common name. I'm intrigued. What did Mr. Kermit do? I don't remember the details, but the whole town was up in arms about it. I'm surprised he's still teaching. It was a horrible black mark against him. Wow, Mr. Kermit has a past. The plot thickens. Mom adds, do you want me to call the school and get to the bottom of it? No, I blurt. Mr. Kermit's an awesome teacher now, and that's the main thing, right? Who cares what happened in the 90s? But Kiana, it was a cheating scandal. I don't want you mixed up in something like that. Relax, Mom, I assure her. I guarantee that there isn't any cheating going on in SCS 8. I can say that with total confidence because there isn't anything going on, period. Why would we even bother to cheat when Mr. Kermit never even looks at the few papers he gets? Eventually, she agrees to let the subject drop. I end the Skype call, my mind racing. Suddenly, I've cracked a mystery that's been nagging at me from the very first moment I followed Parker's schedule into room 117. Why would Mr. Kermit want to teach a class like the Unteachables? Answer, he doesn't. He gets a bad class every year because of what happened way back in the 90s. Seems a little crazy that he's still paying for a mistake from so long ago, but if Mom remembers, other people do too. Turns out SCS 8 isn't just a dumping ground for the rejects of the school. The reject teachers wind up there too. So Mr. Kermit is famous. If Mom still remembers what he did way back when, that counts as fame. Okay, it was a bad thing, but so what? On reality TV shows, the biggest stars are always the jerks. Besides, cheating scandal or not, I can't forget how he spoke up for our class to Mrs. Vargas, and how he fought for Barnstorm's right to stay with the football team. He may not be much of a teacher, but I'm more convinced than ever that he's one of the good guys. I'm almost anxious to get to school the next day, and it isn't just because Chauncey's barking the house down with whooping cough. When I get to room 117, though, Mr. Kermit is absent. We have a substitute, Mrs. Landsman. Mr. Kermit's not exactly a young guy, but Mrs. Landsman is really old. Raheem does a quick sketch of her, rising from the grave as part of a zombie apocalypse. The kid is really talented. The picture makes the rounds of the class by paper airplane. Dawn of the Dead, hisses Mateo when the portrait lands on his desk. No talking, Mrs. Landsman orders. Too late. A nickname is born. She's Dawn of the Dead. Dawn for short. She's grouchy, but we should be used to that by now, our regular teacher being a gold medalist at the Grouch Olympics. It feels different, though. Dawn crabs at us, while Mr. Kermit just crabs because crabbing is his natural state. So when some of it lands on us, we don't take it personally. We just happen to be in the same room. Dawn is yammering on about the Battle of Gettysburg when I hear a power hum, low but growing in volume. At first, I'm afraid the school's about to blow up, and then I realize the sound is coming from the desk next to me, Aldo. His face is almost as red as his hair as he devotes all his breath to maintaining the sound. Now the hum is coming from behind me at a slightly different pitch. I risk a glance over my shoulder. Barnstorm's doing it too, a look of unholy glee on his face. Next, the noise drops at least an octave. Elaine, buzzing like a bassoon. Well, we Californians know how to prank a sub as well as anybody, so I jump right in. Pretty soon, SCS-8 is vibrating. Alarmed, Dawn of the Dead puts in a call to the custodian. As soon as Mr. Carstairs comes in, we stop humming. It was happening just a second ago, the substitute teacher insists. It sounded like a problem with the wiring. The custodian rakes us with a rueful look. It's the kids, ma'am. They're messing with you. They do it to all the subs. Dawn doesn't like that. For a minute there, I'm afraid we're going to have a real zombie apocalypse on our hands. But in the end, what can she do besides yell? She does a whole lot of that. It's pretty jarring when you're used to Mr. Kermit, who barely speaks at all. We fight back. We do the old drop a textbook trick at least 20 times. Barnstorm drums with his crutches on the floor. Elaine pretends to be asleep, which is odd because Raheem stays awake and alert. Mateo speaks to the substitute in Dothraki and does all his written work in elven runes. That's right, I said work. Dawn of the Dead is trying to run this like an actual class. Who does she think she is? Take out your math books, she announces. What math books? Barnstorm returns. Surely there are math books. Her frustration is growing. How do you study math? We do worksheets, Mateo supplies. What worksheets? I don't see any worksheets. There should be a lesson plan. Of course there should if we had a normal teacher, but Dawn of the Dead doesn't know Mr. Kermit. Maybe she thinks we ransacked the classroom before she arrived and threw out all the notes on how she was supposed to run the day. Whatever the reason, she's getting madder and madder. With no lesson plans to go by, Dawn finds a language arts paragraph in some random book. But then she chooses Parker to read it out loud. So obviously he takes forever to sound out the first word. And because we've been giving her a hard time all day, she picks now to decide that somebody's yanking her chain when Parker's the only one who isn't. So she sends him to the principal's office. 60 seconds later, we hear a pickup truck with a broken muffler start up and peel out of the parking lot. You know, he didn't do that on purpose, I tell Dawn. He has a reading problem and he's sensitive about it. Miss Fountain comes over and tries to calm everybody down by inviting us for another circle time. Circle time? Dawn is outraged. These students are too old for circle time, and so are yours. Miss Fountain seems to be about to launch into her speech on how no one is too old for positive reinforcement. But then she takes a good look at Dawn of the Dead, who actually might be. She beats a hasty retreat to her own class. When the bell finally rings at 3:30, Dawn of the Dead tells us we're the most disrespectful class she's ever met in her long teaching career, and we should all be ashamed of ourselves. My son went to this school. He's a successful journalist today, and he'd be appalled to see what's become of the place that gave him his education. You students are a new low. I don't think you'd ever behave for Mr. Kermit the way you behaved today. As we listen to her sensible heels clicking down the hall, a strange quiet descends in room 117. Yeah, well, maybe Mr. Kermit isn't a cranky old bag like you, Aldo tosses after her when she's too far away to hear it. The thing is, she's right, Raheem muses, brow furrowed. We wouldn't behave that way for Ribbit. I wonder why. I could answer that, because even though Mr. Kermit kind of ignores us, he knows we're his class and he sticks up for us when we need it. He likes us in his way, and I'd never be able to explain it to the others, but I think in our way, we might be starting to like him too. When Mr. Kermit enters room 117 the next morning, he's greeted by a sight he's never seen before. The 7 of us, quiet and attentive, seated at our desks, hands folded, eyes front. Let's face it, there's no way Dawn of the Dead said anything good about us yesterday. This, then, is payback time, and none of us are looking forward to it. You can feel the tension in the air as we wait for our teacher to let us have it. Mr. Kermit sets his newspaper and his coffee down on his desk and looks from face to face. What? Nobody answers, so he starts handing out the first worksheet of the day. The instant the paper hits our desks, there's a pen in every hand, and all heads are down. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the teacher pull up short, frowning. This is another first. The entire class hard at work. No airplanes circling overhead, no talking. He shrugs and returns to his desk, peering down at the crossword puzzle. I turn my attention to the assignment, which is about current events, and I think hard about what I've seen lately in the news, on the internet, and in social media. The intercom buzzes to life. Mr. Kermit, comes the voice of the secretary. Principal Vargas is available this morning if you'd like to discuss Mrs. Landsman's report on your students from yesterday. You can almost hear the jarring sound of a needle scratching across the vinyl record. We all freeze, staring up at our teacher. If Donna the Dead filed a report, you can bet she gave us a Z minus minus. No, Mr. Kermit replies. Thanks anyway. That gets our attention. Is Mr. Kermit so detached from reality that he doesn't think anything that happened yesterday was bad? Or is it that he never read Dawn's report, just like he never reads any of our work? The mood in room 117 lightens a little. Whatever the reason, it looks as if we might be off the hook. It occurs to me that maybe Mr. Kermit never reads our stuff because none of the Unteachables ever hand in anything worth reading. That's an easy fix. There's an essay on the question on the back of today's worksheet, and I make up my mind to knock it out of the park. The prompt is about mass transit, subways, buses, and light rail trains. I believe in that kind of thing anyway. I'm from LA, where our transit systems are a joke, and what do we get for it? Traffic jams and pollution. Pretty soon the entire page is full, and I'm only getting started. I approach Mr. Kermit's desk. Ribbit has pushed his puzzle aside, and he's examining a memo from the office. I catch the heading, Report of Substitute Teacher, across the top. He notices me, and I search his eyes for any reaction to what has to be a horrible rundown of her day with a class of unteachable barbarians. Are you really mad at us? I ask in a small voice. He looks like the question never occurred to him. There are two sides to every story, he says finally. He reaches down and slides the report into the trash can. Is there something I can do for you, he adds, obviously wishing I would go away. Can I have more paper? His brow furrows. For what? My essay. I ran out of space. That causes kind of a stir in our class. In SCSA, kids do too little work, never too much. Mr. Kermit's back into his puzzle now, and it's almost as if he's hoping I'll forget what I asked for and leave him alone. So can I have it? I persist, and he looks blank. The paper. Yes, fine. Well, where is it? He gets up from his desk and surveys the room, and it's like he suddenly found himself in a strange and exotic location, a place he's never seen before. He leads me to a storage closet and opens the door, empty except for the cobwebs. He turns to me completely helpless. Maybe Miss Fountain has extra paper, I suggest. I'm on it. Parker bolts for the door so suddenly that he knocks over his desk and goes flying. He face plants on the floor, springs right back up, and disappears into the hall. The next thing we hear is Miss Fountain's voice from the next room. Parker, you're bleeding. He has a driver's license, Barnstorm sneers. The kid can barely walk. Parker's back a few minutes later, holding a wad of pink-stained paper towels to his bloody nose. He hands me a sheaf of lined paper, also pink-stained. I fill four full pages before I'm done with my essay, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know I'm just a short-timer, but I can't let my work habits go totally down the drain while I'm here. I'm going to have to be ready to hit the ground running when I get back to my real school in California. I march up to the front to hand my paper in to Mr. Kermit, and he looks at me like I've just presented him with a plate of baby scorpions. It's my essay, I reply to the question he probably won't ask. I can't wait to hear what you think. He accepts the papers, places them on the corner of the desk, and goes back to his crosswords. Aren't you going to read it? I press. Of course, he assures me without looking up. 3 days later, the pages still sit on the corner of the desk untouched. Parker's blood spots are turning brown. Next chapter, called Barnstorm Anderson. Hope you're enjoying.